Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to another installment of the No Trade Clause podcast brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. I'm your host, Aaron Washington here. Glad to be back with you guys on another episode. This is episode 88 for us. And this evening, I have the opportunity to speak with special guest Ian Begley. He covers the Knicks, the Nets, the NBA at large for SNY TV. Some of you guys may be familiar with him, especially if you're fans of those New York teams. Sure, you've seen his work. Really great stuff. Covers those teams at a high level. Ian, just want to take the opportunity to thank you for joining this podcast. We've had a lot of great guests over the years. Your work definitely stands out. You do some great things in the NBA space. So just want to thank you for the time and really looking forward to this conversation here about the Knicks, the Nets, and a couple other teams in the NBA.
I really appreciate the kind words, Aaron. It's good to be here with you. I'm looking forward to getting into it all. And I'm glad we were, after a long back and forth, we were able to figure out a date and time. So I'm excited to be here.
Hey, better late than never is what I always say. As long as it happens, it's all good. So thanks again. And this should be a good one. So to get right into the content here, everybody, the roadmap is pretty simple. Ian covers the Knicks and Nets, as I stated. We're going to get into those two teams, how they've been doing so far. This is the quarter point of the season, essentially, for most teams. We're looking at somewhere between 19, 20 games for most teams during the season here. So we want to kind of highlight a few players, how they've been doing so far. And then we're going to get into some tank talk here a little bit, talking about the Spurs, talking about the Pistons, how they've been doing, what they can do to kind of turn their ships around as we approach the quarter point and going forward through the season, what they can do to kind of right some wrongs here, even if they're already kind of on the outside looking into the playoff race. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the New York Knicks here. The Knicks have had an interesting season so far. They're doing pretty well by all accounts. Going and looking at their overall record, looks like they're about 12-8 here through 20 games. Efficiency ratings, 11th in offense, 9th in defense. So you do see that staple of a Tom Thibodeau team, top 10 defensively ranked team, 11th in offense. So that has also been a bright spot for them through about 20 games of the season. One of their primary drivers of this team, Jalen Brunson, the big offseason acquisition last year, he's been doing very well, especially from deep, Ian. That's something I've noticed in his play so far this season. 45% on threes on 7 attempts per game. Just for context, his previous high from three is 41%, which he achieved last season. So Jalen Brunson has definitely been a force from behind the arc. Although the in-season performance against the Bucks was a little bit of a disappointment for him, overall his season has been very solid. Another all-star campaign for him. I'm sure the Knicks are very happy to have him playing at a high level. And then looking on the inside, kind of conversely looking at Mitchell Robinson's performance, he's doing what he does best. Just an absolute beast on the boards. Offensive rebounding is his calling card. He's doing that at an extremely high level so far. Interestingly enough, his blocks are down from where he's usually at. I think his block percentage is only at about 2.4%. In the past, it's been a lot higher, as high as 5%. But I think that's one of the hallmarks of a guy that's really starting to kind of find his footing as a defender. He's not chasing blocks the way he used to. He's just staying steady, keeping his ground, and just securing a lot of rebounds for that team. And then some of the role pieces, the ancillary pieces have been good. Looking at Josh Hart's performance, Dante DiVincenzo, they're hustling, they're playing defense, they're doing all the things that Tom Thibodeau would love to see for those guys to do. So by all accounts, it's been a very solid season. Unfortunately, they didn't quite get to where they wanted to go in the in-season tournament, which we can talk about here in a little bit. But just to hand you the floor here, Ian, what has stood out to you here so far about the Knicks' performance? Brunson, Robinson, the role players. What have you seen so far from this team over about 20 games of the season?
Yeah, to me, it starts with Mitchell Robinson, Aaron, for everything that you mentioned, particularly the offensive rebounding and particularly the way that, by and large, he's been able to handle pick and rolls, defend pick and rolls, disrupt pick and rolls, and he's been able to stay on the floor, which was an issue for him when he was a younger player. But now you don't see the foul trouble. You don't see the silly fouls. You see it at a much lower rate than you used to. And when you talk about the Knicks having good defensive numbers, I mean, if you look at that starting five, Jalen Brunson gives you effort, but is not going to be an all-defense candidate. Julius Randle, not going to be an all-defense candidate. So I think he's cleaning up a lot of mistakes back there. He's the main reason why they are where they are defensively. And also, even when this team struggles with its shot, and it's happened from time to time, particularly earlier in the season, they're getting so many extra opportunities because of Mitchell Robinson's offensive rebounding, Isaiah Hartenstein's offensive rebounding, Josh Hart's offensive rebounding. So they could shoot poorly, but they can still win a game based on winning the possession battle. And Mitchell Robinson has had a big role in that aspect of the game.
100%. All those guys, as you mentioned, have been doing their job to a T. And, we can't talk about the Knicks without talking about Julius Randle specifically. And in my notes, I really wanted to separate him from the rest of the team because dealing with Julius Randle, it's been a roller coaster so far for the Knicks organization, for the fans of the team. I'm sure through about 10 games of the season, they were, chanting for this guy to be traded. Randle's going back into a slump. He's back in his, 2021 campaign numbers. It really was the case for him. He struggled through about 10 games of the season. He was averaging about 18 points per game on splits of 33, 25, 70. Just very poor shooting. You would see lines like 4 for 16 and 3 for 14 shooting, things like that. Just really subpar shooting for him. Although the box scores in general, overall numbers weren't too bad. But you look at the next 10 games after that, it's been a totally different story for him. Almost 25 points a game now, 24.9, 51% from 2 as opposed to 33, 34% from 3 as opposed to 25. He's still not just scorching the nets from 3, but 34 over 25 is a huge improvement. He's almost at league average now, so that's a huge jump for a guy like him. And then a slight increase from the free throw line. And then another key point on the three-point percentage is the fact that he's taking less threes per game. So he used to be at about 6.6 a game. He's down now to about 4.7. So it looks like he's choosing his shots a little bit more carefully. He's not jacking as much from the outside. But his rebounding numbers have been good all the way through. He's averaging about 10 boards a game now. And in that Hornets game back on November 28th, he was at 20 boards for that game total. So Randle and Robinson are really kind of the leading forces here for the great rebounding numbers that the Knicks are setting here. So Randle's definitely getting back on track. That's a great sign for the Knicks, great sign for the fans. And if he's playing like this, they can go really far, do some great things. So I wanted to highlight his play here so far because it's been a roller coaster, but it looks like he's figured things out.
Yeah, it's interesting, Aaron, because, he came into training camp saying this is an important training camp for me because he was coming off that ankle surgery and he wasn't able to do everything that he's used to doing in his offseason. So he kind of hinted early on that the physical element might be the last thing that comes back for him. But even in that limited offseason, he felt he was able to take advantage by watching a lot of tape, working on the mental side of his game, and seeing where maybe he could get to his spots easier. Maybe he could be a little bit more efficient. Talked about wanting to be more efficient coming into the season. And then, the first 10 games happened. And sure, a lot of Knicks fans felt like, here we go, same old Julius Randle. And I think it was a matter of him really getting his feet under him, getting back in rhythm over that first 10 games, working things out in a way that he needed to because he wasn't able to be on the court that often over the summer. And more recently, the Knicks have not played a competitive schedule. They've played some bad teams, but they've beaten the teams that they're supposed to beat. Julius Randle's been in the middle of all of that. And I think what you're seeing from him lately is he's not taking a lot of bad shots. He maybe once or twice a game, he'll take a bad shot or he'll over dribble with his back to the basket, turn it over. That's happening less frequently than it was early on in the year. And he's really, really spreading the ball around. When a second defender comes at him, he's getting rid of it, finding an open shooter. He's done a great job of that. His assist numbers have been really strong. So I think you have to like where Julius Randle is at the moment. If you're a Knicks fan, particularly the way he played in that in-season tournament quarterfinal game in Milwaukee, he was just phenomenal, overshadowed by bad Knicks defense, but he was fantastic that night.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the in-season tournament performance here for Randle and the Knicks overall. As you mentioned, Randle had a phenomenal game, 41 points. He really pulled a number on the Bucks here, even though they lost that game. That was a great performance for him, and just another sign that Randle, again, is really regaining his confidence. He's regaining his form. He's back in better shape, and for a basketball player, that's half the battle, is just being in the right shape, being in the right frame of mind. So for him, it's coming together. They secured a wild card spot. They did get into the tournament, like you said, 3-1 record. They lost against the Bucks back in group play, but they secured wins over the Wizards, the Heat, and the Hornets. And that Heat game in particular was a huge game for them because they were down by as many as 21 points. And they mounted a huge comeback in the fourth quarter. That was a 29-11 edge. They really just kind of put the clamps on Miami. They give them a hard time. It was Miami's probably worst loss of the group play stage, and it really kind of knocked them out effectively because there's too much working against them in that last game. They did get to that quarterfinal stage, and they were set up nicely to maybe perform an upset like the Pacers did against the Celtics, but it just wasn't meant to be. They allowed 60% shooting from the field overall and 60% shooting from the three-point line. And when you're allowing numbers like that, it's just really hard to get over the hump there. Brunson himself didn't have any three-pointers. He was 0 for 5. So that was a tough loss for them. But just the fact that they were able to get into that tournament was a great sign. To get in, you have to at least be 3-1. And even then, it's not a sure thing. And their point differentials was what allowed them to get in. They were plus 42 getting into that tournament. So for the Knicks, yes, it was disappointing. They really got hammered by the Bucks. But the fact that they got in was really positive. But if we zoom out from there, we look at, okay, they didn't make the in-season tournament. Look, the rest of the season, I believe they were the 5th seed last year. They defeated the Cavs in the first round, really put the Heat hurting on them. Couldn't get past the Heat. And I'm really trying to think about this roster and what they can do here because it's largely the same pieces here. Grimes is still there, Barrett, Brunson, Randle. And, this team, they're setting out to do more than what they did last year. And I'm just kind of wondering, where they go from here. So if we zoom out, Ian, and we're looking into the rest of the season, what do you expect from this team going forward? What do you think is a realistic finish for them? As far as like what the team is expecting, the fans are expecting, how can things turn out from here now that the in-season tournament is over and they're looking forward towards the grand prize, which would be an NBA championship?
Yeah, they certainly bet on internal development over the offseason. They did not make any big moves outside of the Toppin trade and the DiVincenzo signing. But I do think that masked a little bit their bigger plan here. I mean, we've been talking about it locally really since Leon Rose took over, the idea that he's going to swing a big trade. He's going to use their first-round picks and their young players on team-friendly deals to make a big trade. I think that is still the goal. It hasn't changed. It's just a matter of when. And I think if they're kind of scuffling along as you get closer to the trade deadline, I think there'd be more pressure internally for them to make that big time move at the trade deadline. But if they're where they are now, winning 58, 60% of their games going into February, there's not going to be, I don't think, that internal pressure to make that big time move at the deadline. So I think that's kind of the thing that's not hanging over this team right now, but that's the next step. And it could be hanging over this team eventually because, young players like a Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley, Mitchell Robinson, nobody likes to hear their name in trade rumors, and those are going to come up probably in a major way over the next few weeks. And so I think that is a potential issue that could distract the group a little bit. But by and large, if they give you what they've given you over these first 20 games, over the next 62, this team should be right where it was last year in terms of the conference. And then, you see what happens in the postseason. One thing I keep an eye on, though, Quentin Grimes said it in Milwaukee. He's been very frustrated with his role. The ball is in the big three's hands a lot. That's R.J. Barrett, Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle. And Grimes being a part of that starting five doesn't get a chance to touch it a lot. It says he just feels like every shot he takes is he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. So that's something that they need to address internally, because for them to be at their best, they need Quentin Grimes at his best. He's another guy in that starting five that is a strong defender, and he's been able to knock down the three in the past. So they need to get him right, get him going if they want to end up in that 5th seed, 4th seed, maybe even 3rd seed in the East when this regular season concludes.
100%. Good point on Grimes. He's struggling mentally. He's struggling with his overall confidence. And, you don't touch the ball, it's going to really do a number on you. And I believe he said that, he takes a shot and he feels like if he misses 1 or 2 shots, he gets yanked. He's out of the game. So for him, it's almost like he's a rookie again. He's dealing with the expectations of, hey, you got to perform in 5 minutes or you're getting pulled for whoever is coming behind him, whether it be DiVincenzo or Harder or whatnot. So definitely got to keep an eye on that, Ian. That's a good point there. He kind of ties that whole thing together with that starting lineup. So if he's at his best, then the Knicks ceiling is that much higher. So the Knicks do have a neighbor here in New York, not too far down the road here. That would be the Brooklyn Nets, and they're actually not too far apart in the standings. The Nets are also doing pretty well themselves. Bridges is still doing his thing over there. Recently had a 42-point game. I believe he dropped 20 points in the first quarter the other night. So for Mikal Bridges, I mean, another fantastic season for him. It looks like overall they've had a strong season. They're right there in the playoff race again. Not sure how that looks going towards the end of the season. I know most people have had them, maybe in the bottom half, bottom third of that playoff standings, the final standings there in the Eastern Conference. And you know what you're going to get from Bridges. That's pretty obvious. But when you look towards one of their X factors on this team, another guy that's going to command a lot of touches, a lot of minutes, that's Cam Thomas. And he's recently returned from injury. He had a fantastic start of the season before he rolled his ankle and got hurt. For Cam Thomas, the really interesting question I really want to throw out here for you, Ian, is what does this long-term future look like in Brooklyn? We know that right now things are great. He's getting the minutes. He's finally getting an opportunity. But he doesn't have that long-term contract. He's not under contract for the long term in this team. Spencer Dinwiddie is still the starting point guard here. They do have a lot of great players on this team. So I want to start the conversation here with Cam Thomas. Rest of the season here, his role solidified. Any thoughts on how the Nets might approach his future on this team, and what his role could look like for the rest of this season?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think teams had checked in with the Nets again and again prior to this season on Cam Thomas, and there was never anything there. I think the Nets, they obviously never got an offer that they felt was worth moving Thomas. I think Thomas not having a consistent role made it a little tougher for himself and for knowing where he fit within the organization. But now that's gone, right? He's established himself as a key part of this net team this season, key piece in terms of determining where they're going to end up ultimately. And the interesting thing to me is I think the Nets, given where they are, given everything that had happened past few years under Sean Marks with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, things not working out, they pivoted quickly. They seem to have a good nucleus in place, but I do think that there's a desire to win in the very near future. So I think when you look at Cam Thomas, is he a trade chip for Brooklyn? Is he a player that would be a part of a package for them to bring in, a top of the line starter to play with Mikal Bridges and the rest of the group? I kind of see it leaning more towards that than towards the Nets committing the big money that Cam has earned and will command in an open market situation. I could be wrong there, but I think the way things had gone coming up to this season, Cam is going to be seeking a lot of money when he's going looking for his next contract, and he's going to command a lot of money for his next contract. And I just wonder if Brooklyn sees that on the horizon and they say, hey, we know we want to bring in another high volume player. Let's include Cam in a deal to get the best player we can.
That's a very realistic outcome for them. When you look at a team like the Brooklyn Nets that have so many pieces, you go down the roster and you see players like Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, Cam Thomas, a lot of guys that can play, and Lonnie Walker, the fourth, who is getting a lot of minutes here in the absence of Cam Thomas. He's another guy that now that Cam Thomas is back, his minutes are going to be in flux, and he might take a back seat here. So for this team, it's definitely something. A situation where we could see some consolidation going forward. Whether Thomas is included in that or not, it remains to be seen. But, I mean, they do have a lot of assets, the tradable assets here, a lot of different contracts. So for them, I think this season is kind of going to be a litmus test for them. How do they look in terms of, the pecking order of the Eastern Conference? Can they stack up against a New York Knicks team? Can they stack up against the Bucks and the Celtics here? How do they fare against them? To this point, I think if you ask most people, they would say that they're in a tier or two a little bit below them, maybe closer to a play-in territory team. To this point in the season, I believe they're about 10-9. So you're seeing a close to 500 team, and extrapolating that out to 82 games, you might be looking at a team that wins a little over half their games. So maybe they end up at 42 or 43. Very good team, but I think they're definitely a couple of steps away from contender status. And maybe that does manifest itself in the form of a trade to where they kind of put those pieces together. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on for the future. But for now, I mean, there's no denying they have a great team. You look at their numbers, very solid across the board. Offensively, looks like they're in the top 10 so far. Defensively, I think they're a little bit behind where I thought they'd be. They're 19th here so far through 19 games. So they definitely have more going for them on the offensive side of the ball. I think Cam Thomas is a big part of that. Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie gaining his footing again. So I think they're going to be right back in the thick of things when it comes to maybe the 6 through 8 spots in the Eastern Conference. Very solid, but I think they're still going to kind of have their eye forward towards maybe some of the big fish that may become available later on. I think we're kind of on the same page there. But, looking at Bridges specifically, if they want to get that big fish, do you think he's better suited to be that number 2 next to a tier 1 type of guy? I mean, Bridges has had some great games in the past, but just not sure if he's the number 1 guy. If you're ready to contend, if you're ready to win, that he can really carry your team by himself to be that top guy. How do you feel about his status on this team, and how he might fit next to a higher profile type guy there in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think he's done pretty well when he's gotten this opportunity here in Brooklyn to shoot the ball more, to carry more of an offensive load. And I think that will do nothing but attract bigger name players here to Brooklyn. But I agree with you, Aaron, in that I think when you look at the big picture, if you're a championship level team, you need another star, another 2 stars maybe, next to a Mikal Bridges. He's a wonderful player, a valuable player on both ends of the floor. So this is not a knock on him at all. But I do think to get to that next level, you're going to need another high echelon player. And I think he does nothing but attract that player. But I don't think he is that player in terms of teams that can contend for a title. I don't think he could be the number 1 on that team. Happy to be wrong there. But I do think that the Nets are at least going to dip their toes in the water in terms of big swings on any stars that become available. I think they're well positioned to be in those conversations. And I think, the Damian Lillard situation, I told you a lot, because Damian Lillard wanted to come to Brooklyn because of Mikal Bridges. I don't know how close the Nets actually got to swinging a Lillard trade, but the idea that Damian Lillard would want to come to a franchise because of Bridges, I think tells you how stars around this league view that young player, and that's a good thing for the Nets.
100%. We're going to have to keep an eye on how these guys operate. I think the off seasons are going to be really interesting for them. But in any case, they do have a lot going for them. And Bridges specifically is going to continue to be a key contributor for this team. So, not sure if it's quite a rivalry here right now between the Knicks and the Nets. I think the Knicks have a little bit of a leg up. But in any case, the Nets definitely are a solid team in the NBA, and one that's definitely going to be a tough out in the first round if they are to get that far. But to change gears here a little bit for the second part of our podcast here, Ian, we're going to look at a couple of teams that on the other side of the coin are definitely struggling here so far through the first 20 or so games. So we're going to first look here at the Detroit Pistons. A lot just going wrong in Detroit right now. You signed Monty Williams to a monster contract. He gets a 5-year deal from the Pistons. They make some offseason moves here. They want to get better. And it just looks like almost everything they've done over the past 3 or 4 years just hasn't panned out. You look at that Joe Harris move to bring him in. He's making $19 million. He's not really getting any kind of part in the rotation. He's not really playing. The center rotation is overcrowded. You have Wiseman, Bagley, Stewart, Duren all competing for minutes there. At least one of those guys every single game is going to get a DNP or hardly any minutes. Garbage time maybe. A lack of shooting and spacing. They ranked 29th in three-pointers made at 10.3 a game. It's just really tough for them right now offensively looking at their numbers. But interestingly enough, it's not just the shooting. It's the turnovers. They ranked 29th in turnovers. I mean, there's at 17 a game. They give the ball over a ton. 29th ranked offense overall. So a lot of issues there. A little bit of light on the horizon. Bogdanovich returns tonight. Looks like they took another loss here tonight. But Bogdanovich instantly made an impact, already dropped a 20-point game for them. So that's going to help a ton. Hopefully Monty Morris can get back at some point to help cut down those turnovers. Monty Morris is one of the best in the league at just taking care of the ball. So they really need to sort out that center rotation, figure out who's going to be playing, open up the floor for Cade Cunningham. It looks like he might not be the guy to kind of carry that team. He might be a Bridges type of guy to where he can do a lot as the main guy, but not sure if you're going to get to where you want to be with him in the fold here. So those are just a few observations I made for the Pistons here so far. But in your opinion, Ian, any thoughts on anything else they can do to kind of fix where they're at right now? Get rid of this stench that's in the air with this franchise record losing streak. Just some of the worst times in Pistons history here. How do they kind of get out of this rut they kind of find themselves in right now?
Well, the hope that I'm told is that Bogdanovich coming back will help them win some games and help turn the tide. I think they're going to take their time in assessing how this team looked with Bogdanovich, and maybe they can get on the right side of the win column here with that veteran back. And that's, according to teams in touch with them. And the interesting thing there is, as Aaron, but Bogdanovich was very much a topic of discussion at the trade deadline last year. A lot of teams had interest, Philly, the Lakers. And so they're going to be faced, Detroit is, with that question again. Where do we move Bogdanovich? Do we keep him because he's helping us? I mean, in the immediate future, right here, right now, they need to win some games to kind of calm the waters, because this it just hasn't worked well so far under this current regime, and not Monty Williams necessarily, but the front office management. So they need to, I think, to show ownership that, hey, this is not who we are. This 16, 17 game losing streak is not who we are. Once we get whole, we can compete. And I think that's where the focus is right now. Whether or not that happens, I'm not sure. It's a lot to put on Bogdanovich's shoulders. You mentioned Monty Morris too. Obviously, having him would help things very much. But those guys are not going to clear that logjam at the center position. They're not going to clear up that guard rotation. Jaden Ivey, it's been interesting to see how he's been used. And so there are plenty of issues under the surface outside of injuries that have really hampered this group.
Absolutely. And I want to zoom in on Jaden Ivey here a little bit. You mentioned his role. It's been really inconsistent. That's something that's kind of baffling to me. He was the number 5 pick last year in the draft for them. Over the last 5 games, he's gone 32, 33 minutes, and then down to 19, then down to 13, and then back at 29 minutes. And I think tonight he was also in the mid to high 20 minute range. So for him, it's just really hard to kind of find a rhythm and really understand what he's supposed to be contributing. If his role is continuously going between 30, 20 in the teens as far as minutes goes. Marcus Sasser was playing phenomenal for them. He was in the started to make waves in the rookie race here, and he dropped back down to less than 10 minutes here tonight of playing time. So just a lot of inconsistent roles for these guys. I think that's kind of hampering their progress and their growth. And I just think that the rotation overall, who's playing the more minutes, Killian Hayes playing a lot of minutes, Isaiah Stewart, clogging the driving lanes a little bit here for Cade is not helping. Cade is just turning the ball over at an astronomical rate. His true shooting percentage is definitely below league average. He's at about 49% right now, where the league average is somewhere in the mid to upper 50s. So he's just not converting a lot of his shots. And a lot of the advanced metrics here have him finishing pretty much dead last amongst a lot of the other players that control the ball a lot, like Randle and Kuzma and Tyler Hero, other guys that rank pretty low. He's right there at the bottom of the pack. So I think those are some of the moves they need to make. I do agree with you. That center rotation is just a huge mess. I mean, how do you even give all those guys minutes? It's impossible. But a lot of those guys can't play the 4. I think even Isaiah Stewart is miscast as a 4. I think he's better as a rim running energy type 5 to come off the bench, maybe behind a Duren. So those moves are definitely going to put them in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Bogdanovich is going to make a huge difference, but he can't be the end all be all for this team. You can't just snap your fingers and be back in a great place. They're close to last, if not last, in all the major categories. So, I mean, a lot needs to change here. Monty Williams is a great coach, but I do think there are things he needs to change in this rotation. Give Ivy more minutes, maybe cut down Killian Hayes' minutes a little bit. Maybe lean more into an offensively styled team here instead of a defensively styled one, because obviously the defense philosophy is not working. You're not getting stops. Got to change something up here. So hopefully they can right the wrongs here a little bit, win their next couple of games. Uh, Losing against the Grizzlies, losing against the Wizards doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, but there's still a long way to go. And even though they're going to lose a lot of games this season, there are ways you can make the team better, although it's not going to result in a ton more wins in the win column.
Right, right. I think that's the issue too, in a big picture sense, because I think coming into this season, expectations were raised a bit. I think the goal and the expectation was to, be obviously be more competitive than they are now. But beyond that, be in that play-in area geographically in the East, and they're so far from that now. And I go back to the summer when Cunningham, was working out with the Team USA team that went to the World Cup, and he was working out with them as part of the younger group. And I was there for a few days in Vegas, and everybody that I spoke to, scouts that were watching, they said Cade Cunningham looked fantastic. He looked really good. They thought Jalen Green looked good too, but they kept raving about Cade Cunningham. So I expected him to come in here and really take that next step. I think it's got to be concerning for Detroit that it hasn't happened yet. And I think it puts another kind of I would say bad vibes, right? That's what the younger kids say, bad vibes around this team. It's just,
Yep.
and that kind of snowballs on itself, Aaron, as you know. Once it goes in that direction, it's hard to get it back going in a positive way. So that's the challenge for Monty Williams, and that's the challenge for his group, because right now nothing is going right.
It really is not. It really is not. So a lot of different changes here they need to make, and hopefully they can get that started here sooner rather than later because you're losing the fans. You're losing support, you're losing confidence, and if you want to get things back on the right track, you got to do it now because before you know it, the season's going to be half over, and it's going to be really tough to make that turnaround. So to kind of wrap things up here, Ian, let's go ahead and take a look at the Spurs here quickly and their situation here. They're not very much better at all. As of today, they're 3-16, and they've lost 14 games in a row. I never thought I'd be saying that about a Popovich-led Spurs team, but here we are. Wembanyama has been selected, and he's had some great moments, averaging 19 and 9, awesome rim protection. He's had a lot of great highlight moments, but again, it's almost like the Cade situation to where he's kind of working with the one hand tied behind his back. We know he's going to be a great player. He's already, by many accounts, a great player. But when Jeremy Sohan is bringing up the ball as the point instead of Trey Jones, and he's not working in a point forward role, I think that hamstrings what both of those players are capable of. You're just not seeing a free flowing offense. You're not seeing a great defense, and you at least want to see that from a team that has Victor Wembanyama patrolling the middle. So it just looks like it might be time to change that experiment, go in a different direction. Try Trey Jones, maybe even try Devontae Graham. I forgot for a second that he even played for the Spurs, but he is on the roster, and he has a history of putting up some great numbers, specifically in the assist column. So maybe bringing him in to kind of ease the burden a little bit could help them get back on the right track, and hopefully kind of jumpstart everything, not just the starters, but the bench rotation. So, if we're looking at this team as a whole, Ian, I mean, is this a case of, hey, they're young, they're just kind of growing through it, it'll be okay? Uh, is it a bigger problem as a whole with the organization? Is it a little bit of both? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think based on previous history, right, with Greg Popovich, all the success that organization has had, I'm not ready to take it anywhere near a macro issue where it's an organization wide mistake. That's the reason behind they are where they are. It's a talent issue, I think. Yes, you can debate whether Jeremy Sohan should be that point forward or should it be Trey Jones, and Sohan put in a more natural position. Yes, that's certainly something to talk about. But I think in a big picture perspective, this organization has shown time and again it knows how to put players in the best position for them to succeed, for the team to succeed. And I wouldn't expect anything less here with Victor Wembanyama. You look at Devin Vassell, a very good young player, signed a big extension in part because the Spurs needed to get to that salary floor. But I think he also was deserving of a big extension based on how he had played in San Antonio thus far. So there are a lot of things to like with these Spurs. And I think Greg Popovich is probably setting the table for his successor to come in and take over a team that's ready to win. And I don't think that anything you've seen thus far, again, in a macro sense, leads you to believe that the Spurs have made some major mistakes here with Wembanyama in the group. The results are disappointing, but I think that was always going to be the case when you have a team that has this many rotation players that are this young and inexperienced. I think they were inevitably going to lose a bunch of games.
That's true. I mean, I think most of us expected for them to really struggle and really be towards the bottom of the Western Conference. That's not so much a surprise as I think it is the degree to which they've struggled. Look at a 14-game losing streak, almost on par with the Pistons, what they're going through. Just some really crazy stuff for them. Ranking 27th in offense, 27th in defense. Just having a lot of moments that it seems like there's no cohesion on the roster. Wemby struggling. It seems like he's not put in the right positions to succeed. I think that's what has people worried about this team. Not the fact that they're losing, more of like how they're losing and how much of it is going on there in San Antonio. But I mean, I would agree. I don't think that the organization all of a sudden has forgot how to manage a team. You look at the guys that are supporting this roster on the margins. Malachi Branham, Doug McDermott, Julian Sampenny, not exactly guys who are going to light the world on fire for this team. Blake Wesley, just a lot of raw players that I think are still trying to find their way. You look at the player that has the most amount of experience on this team. He doesn't even have 10 years. That's Doug McDermott at 9 years of experience. So take that into account. Yes, it's a talent issue. It's a youth issue. A lot of these guys just haven't learned how to play basketball the right way. Yes, Coach Pop is going to put them in the right positions as much as he can. But at some point, it just comes down to experience. You have to experience it yourself. You have to learn how to play the game. You have to be put in different situations, close game scenarios. That's how you really learn. So, I mean, yes, I would like to see them go with a different approach at the point specifically. But aside from that, it's just going to be tough sledding. And I do think that they will get a little bit better over time as they learn to play with each other. Wembanyama gets better. He needs to work on his ball control here a little bit. Can get stripped pretty easily there, get a little loose with the ball. Obviously, going into his frame here a little bit. I think it's scary to think about how much better they can be once Wembanyama really learns how to play basketball at the highest level correctly, properly. You get a little bit more talent in there. They have another top 3, top 5 selection next year's draft. Hopefully in a couple of years they'll look a lot better, but they're under no pressure. Honestly, this is really only the second year of their total teardown starting over on this team. So we need to keep that in mind. But with all that being said, I think I would like to hopefully see them at least break this losing streak. You don't want to see a team with this much pride in history be this abysmal. But I do think they will get there. It's just going to take a little bit of tweaking of some things on the margins here.
And one thing I will say, I fully agree with you on the idea that defensively, I think they should be better, right? You look at the personnel, you look at Sohan and his role, and why isn't this team better defensively across the board? I think that there's some talent there. Vassell, two-way player. But I'm not sure why the defense has not clicked the way I would expect it to, which is much better than 27th. Obviously, younger players are going to struggle defensively, but just the talent that you have on that side of the ball, I would think that number, that 27th overall ranking in, I guess it was defensive efficiency, I would think that would be higher.
Absolutely. And they do have some time to get there. I mean, these are quarter ranks. These aren't full season ranks. We're not even to the halfway point. So there's still time for these teams to turn it around. And in many cases, I believe they will, and they will get there. So Ian, want to let you go. I know you got a hard stop coming up here, but hey, I want to thank you again for joining the podcast. This was a great discussion about the New York teams. They're both very fascinating. They have a lot going for them. Even in the tanking teams, there's a lot to glean from their situations and what they're working on to get this team better. So thanks again for your contribution to this podcast. Wish you the best this season and going forward from there. So really appreciate it.
Aaron, pleasure is all mine, my friend. I wish the same for you. It was great to be with you and hopefully get a chance to shake your hand sometime on the road in an NBA arena. But a lot of fun to be here. Keep up the great work on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Hey guys, if you want to check out the podcast for yourself here, more of our content episodes are available at notradeclause.com. Our socials, No Trade Clause on Instagram, No Trade Clause, No Trade _clause rather on Twitter. All of our content is there as well as our YouTube page. So we hope to see you on the next episode of No Trade Clause, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy this season, and we'll catch up with you soon.